Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. One of the primary sources of disappointment is sensing our own limitations. Perhaps it is a sign of maturity to recognize these limitations. We realize that we can only do so much, and we learn to live with it. On the other hand, overcoming personal limitations is a classic topic of any self-help program. You can do it is the common refrain of any such inspirational talk. Without brainwashing ourselves in this manner, we are condemning ourselves to lives of disappointment and frustration. So which is it? Should we just bite the bullet and come to terms with who we are and not push ourselves beyond those either natural or self-imposed boundaries? Or should we throw off those shackles and set the sky as the limit? There is no single answer to this question. Every person has to answer it on their own. In all likelihood, there is no consistent answer even for a single person. At different stages of life and in different situations, the answer might change. This is one of the primary challenges that we all have to face as we go through the trials and tribulations of this strange game called life. But it is important to recognize that these limitations are there to begin with. Overcoming them is another matter altogether, but there has to be a limitation in order to have something to overcome. This itself is not so easy to come to terms with. There is no question that it is a sign of a maturity. A teenager might have only the vaguest conception of their own mortality, but that doesn't make them immortal. A young child might dream of all the great things they will do when they will grow up, but we all know that these are really just childish dreams. Everybody goes into certain major transitional phases of their life, hoping that this will transform everything and will lead them into some personal promised land. It might be a degree or a new job or a new relationship or even a new diet. Sometimes these things really work as expected, but all too often they are just more of the same. Still, it is important to have those dreams, childish or otherwise. If we didn't have them, we would invariably be stuck in a rut. We all have to hope and to expect that somehow things will change for the better and do whatever we can to make sure that these dreams come true. Without hope, life is pretty pointless. We all need to believe in ourselves, even if we realize that our beliefs might not be based on anything solid. It is a game we have to play to keep ourselves from falling into that vortex of depression. It has probably always been this way with human beings. In times past, people were probably much more fixed within certain social or economic orbits, and there was really no way of exiting them. In recent times, many of these societal limitations have really been overcome, and there is probably more freedom in this regard than ever before in human history. This, pretty much everyone agrees, is a good thing. Nobody wants to turn back that clock. We all reap the benefits of progress and liberty. That being said, this perpetual march towards a better life and throwing off old limits has its consequences. Recent years have witnessed mass movements in which the most fundamental of previous limitations have been tossed away like an old pair of shoes. The one that most easily comes to mind is the great societal revolution of homosexuality. While this trend is well established in most Western societies, and it is virtual social suicide to challenge it, it is not without the inevitable problems. Among these is the almost obligatory need to push things even further. The direct result of this has been the now widespread trans movement. Not even all those who advocate for homosexuality support this movement, but it is nevertheless firmly embedded into Western society and doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. Where all this goes in the coming years and decades is anybody's guess. The Torah, unsurprisingly, has little to nothing to say about the trans phenomenon. It really didn't exist until very recently, so there's no reason to expect anything about it in either the Bible or Judaism. Men were always men and women were always women, and that was that. Nobody ever thought to challenge this obvious fact of life because it was always so set in stone that there wasn't any point. But even that fact of nature has now been set aside, and anybody wishing to put the proverbial genie back into the bottle is a little behind the times. What does the Bible or Judaism have to offer as far as some guidance to this important matter? This week's parsha is called Ki Teitzei. That is a two-word phrase that means when you go out. This phrase itself is nothing more than an introduction to a commandment concerning how to treat female captives of war. In fact, this entire parsha is really a long list of commandments that don't appear to have all that much to do with each other. It is the third of a series that represents the middle of the book of Deuteronomy, which is the restating or reorienting of the basic laws that comprise the commandments of the Torah, told to the Israelites as they were about to enter the promised land. These commandments deal with such a wide variety of issues that there is no point in trying to make sense or give some order to things. There are certain main issues, such as rape and disputes about the virginity of a newly married girl, and certain prohibited marriages with nearby nations. Divorce and remarriage come up for the first time in this parsha. So does the so-called levirate marriage, in which a man whose brother has died without children is charged with marrying his former sister-in-law. The parsha closes with the famous commandment to wipe out the descendants of the tribe of Amalek. This was the tribe that had attacked the Israelites in the initial stages of the Exodus, shortly after entering the Sinai desert. The attack was unsuccessful, but it left an imprint of vulnerability, and that is the reason for this commandment so late in the Torah. Amalek attacked the Israelites when they were in a relatively weak position and were still adjusting to a life of wandering in the wilderness. This commandment places a perpetual obligation on the descendants of the Israelites to never forget what happened and to always carry this obligation of revenge against whoever the descendants of Amalek might be. In between these more noteworthy commandments is the massive series of well over 100 laws. There are prohibitions of mixing certain species of seeds or animals together. There is something about shooing away a mother bird before taking the eggs from the nest. There are laws about helping others in need with lost articles or broken down transportation. There are prohibitions of prostitution and kidnapping. There is a little of everything here if one is willing to look for it. In the middle of all that is the only statement in the Torah that even remotely touches on the issue of transsexuality. It really has nothing to do with it, but since it is the closest thing there is, it will have to do. This law is really about cross-dressing. In all its glory, it states, "There shall not be a male garment on a woman, and a man shall not dress in a woman's clothing. For any who do this is revolting to HaShem your God." There it is, clear as day. No cross-dressing. It might seem a bit behind the times with unisex clothing and all that, but this single verse sets the standards for traditional Jewish dress. It really boils down to nothing more than this verse says. A man shouldn't wear a woman's clothing and a woman shouldn't wear a man's. So where does transsexuality enter the picture? Again, it really doesn't. But this is where people will look to find something. It does suggest that the gender barriers should not be crossed, at least as far as attire is considered. It is not that big of a stretch to say that if men and women should stick to gender-appropriate clothing, which is really nothing more than an artificial social norm that we have imposed upon ourselves, then something as fundamental and as built-in as sexual organs of the body should also not be altered or crossed. While many people might argue with the wisdom of this limitation, most would agree that the statement in the Torah could and should be extended to a prohibition against transsexuality. Assuming this to be the case, we have to ask ourselves why the Torah would be against this. It may seem obvious to some, but it still needs to be spelled out. It is, quote, revolting to HaShem your God. That just about says it all. The common translation of the word to'eva, revolting, is abomination. This harsh-sounding word has come to represent the all-or-nothing morality of the Torah. Either one agrees that something is an abomination to God or one doesn't. There is little room for anything in between. If God is revolted by this, it means there is something seriously wrong with it. If one disagrees, it means they either don't believe in God or don't feel that God could possibly have such trivial qualms about the things that we do. But to those who firmly abide by this prohibition, things can be stated fairly clearly. Gender is something that is embedded into the DNA. It is about as fixed as anything can be in life. It is a limitation, but it is also an identity. Changing it, assuming such a thing is possible, is really challenging God. People might disagree with all of this, but the view of the Torah is fairly clear. Just because we have the option of altering something as basic as our gender doesn't mean that we should do it. It is an extension of the clothing limitation. Human beings were created in a certain way, and the differences between the sexes are about as basic as things go in our creation. This is stated as clear as a bell at the beginning of Genesis, and here it is again near the end of the Torah. Many people are profoundly disturbed by the idea of people sexually mutilating themselves to fulfill a whim or desire. None of this will change the DNA or the genes. There's no going back to the starting point once done. Doing this on children seems to many to be the height of craziness. Children go through vast changes in the course of their all too short childhood, and this seems to be something that should be delayed until things settle down a bit. Whether anybody can truly have a sex change is a matter of great dispute. There may be some limitations that really cannot be overcome. We have to shoot for the sky to make our lives what we wish them to be, but we also have to have a solid dose of reality thrown in for safety. Perhaps this issue is one in which we can dream about changing, but we nevertheless should not tamper with the firm sexual limitations of the human body. Shabbat Shalom.